Hi everyone, it's good to have you back for another chess lesson. So in previous videos, I talked about mating your opponent with a king and a queen and a king and a rook. And today I'm going to talk about a little more difficult mating pattern, and that is mating your opponent with a king and two bishops. Okay, and you'll notice that normally I would use the chessboard from chess.com. However, today I'm using a chessboard from Lichess. And the reason is Lichess has actually a lot of good practices where you can practice some of these basic mating patterns. And I'll put a link of that in the video notes as well. Now, let's get to this mate. So the situation we have here is that white has a king and two bishops, and black has a king. Okay, now the two bishops, especially when they're operating like this next to each other, they actually are quite effective because they cover a lot of space, right? So if you look at how much space they're covering, they're actually quite limiting the opponent's king. However, the opponent's king in this example could come up toward the white's king. For example, they could go to this d5 square, c5 square. And what you want to do in this pattern is to try to push the opponent's king to one of the sides of the board. So let's say you're in this position and you want a king and push the king to either a8 or h8. Okay, so what do we do? What you want to do is to try to limit their movement. And in a lot of cases, you have to use your king, but also it would help to keep your bishops like this side by side. Okay, so let's say that I will start by bringing my king up. And now the opponent takes their king to c5. And what I want to do is to limit their movement. So I give a check to going down. Now I bring the other bishop in. So what I'm doing is I'm keeping this format of my king and bishops being together. And now I've limited the opponent's king's movement again. So now if you look at the movement of the king, they cannot go further than this number of squares that are covered by the bishop. So now the opponent's king only has these squares to go to. Okay, so now black's king has gone to d6 and I want to limit their movement even further. So I'll bring this bishop here, the other bishop here, and my king here. Okay, so now again, I have limited the black's king movement. Now, they only have a few squares they can go to, and I want to repeat this same pattern. So I go king e6, and they have to go down. Now I bring this bishop to d6, and what I did by this move is that I limited this square so they can only go here, right? And now the king has to come here to d8. And now what I want to do, this is where the real hard work starts, because if I now bring my bishop to c6, what will happen is that black's king can go back to c8, right? So I will have a similar situation. So actually, let's play that out. If I go here, they will have to go back. And now what do I do? If I bring this king down here, I will have a stalemate because black's king will have no other place to go. Note that they cannot go here. They can only come back here, right? And if I bring my king down, then I will have covered this square as well, right? So that's not what I want to do. So let me go back, and black's king goes back here. What I want to do is somehow limit the c8 square so that I can push them to this side of the board. Okay, I want to push them to one of the sides of the board. So I have to limit that c8 square. And this is how I will do it is by taking my bishop here. Okay, so now I broke that previous pattern, but I moved the king to this side, right? Now where can the king go? They only have these two squares, and I'm going to try to limit this other square also, and now they can only go here. Now, what's the danger here? It is that black's king can escape from this side, right? So I do not want that to happen because I want them to be in the corner. And what I'll do is that I'll create the opposition. I'll bring my king here, and now they can only go back. However, the nice thing about it is now I can give a check, push them to this side. I can give them another check, push them to another side of the board. And now again, they would want to try to escape from the h7 square, but now I can create another opposition and they'll go back here. So now I actually did manage to push black's king to the corner, right? Now, think about what happens next. if I bring black's king only has this h8 square, which it is currently in, and the g8 square. They do not have the f8 square because that's covered by my black squared bishop, right? So they only have 2 squares. If I try to limit them further by bringing the bishop to d5, then that would cause another stalemate because I will be covering the g8 square, right? So how do I make sure that black's king does not fall into a stalemate or trap and I'm able to mate them, okay? So what I want is to essentially force them to this square while they're in a check. So what I will do is that I will bring this bishop down here. So I will still cover this. And now black's king has to come back. Now I can cover this g8 square with a check. They have to go back to h8. And now I can play f6 and that's checkmate. Okay, so let's quickly review what happened. What I did is that I started, let me actually go back in the moves. What I did is that I started from this position and tried to limit black's opponent's movement by keeping all my pieces together and constantly cutting the number of squares they could go through. So if you look at the same square the same pattern one more time, I created the same pattern. I just moved everything from the 3rd rank to the 5th rank and limited black's king, right? Now, what they did is that I limited them even further. And as they went down to the last rank, now I want to push them into one corner. Instead of creating that same pattern, I went to bishop to b7, right? So the previous repetition was just to show you that what it can lead to in terms of stalemate. But then I tried to limit their movement and going back to c8. Now they have to go to e8, and now I covered this d8 square, causing them to go further to the side. And now I created opposition, and with a check and a couple of checks and another opposition, I moved them completely to the side of the board, okay? And now here, the only thing I need is to make one extra move so that I'm able to get them to this corner with a check and essentially cause a checkmate. So I went bishop e7, now they have to come back, and now I can give them a check and then another check, and that is checkmate. Okay, so it is quite simple. It might need a few times practicing. And this is probably what I showed you is probably not, there are probably faster ways to cause a checkmate. However, all of them leave in the same way. You always have to push black's king to one square on the corner of the board and try to cause a checkmate in that sense. So I hope that this was useful to you, and I will put a link to the practice exercises that are on Lichess so that you can practice this on your own. Don't forget to let me know if there are other topics that you want me to talk about, and I'll soon be back on with another video on checkmating with a knight and a bishop. Take care and see you soon.